Steps to Excellence is a wonderful name for a series of instructional programs for music students. The two words, steps and excellence, describe important elements of the learning process. Most of us who have strived have found that a great deal of our progress has been made by the use of steps. Only rarely does one experience leaps. The other word, excellence, is a tremendous concept. A person must realize that excellence is much different than satisfactory or good enough. Consider excellence. Is it your goal? I like to think that our striving is like traveling along a path, with excellence being our goal and destination. In this series, I hope that what I offer will help you along the path. I say help you along the path because by now, I hope you students know that your main guide on this path is your regular teacher. But before I go further, I have a question for you, the student, and even you, the teacher. Do you have the courage and desire to travel this path and strive for excellence? Yes. I said courage. Anyone who has strived knows that along the way, there will be heartache, doubt, disappointment, and even episodes of failure. But don't forget, if you take on a real challenge, the success you achieve will be tremendously exhilarating. If you take on the challenge, you'll also have the satisfaction of knowing you grabbed onto something and given it your best. So I say go for it. Let's get motivated. It has been my experience that a student striving for excellence gets help in taking steps from many sources. When you one day encounter a musician whom you respect, take note of what you observe. You may find that you've discovered attitudes and behaviors that can help you to take yet another step forward. This series of clinics from Yamaha is wonderful in that developing players can see and hear many outstanding musicians talk about what they think is important for a student of their particular instrument. But even if you're a French horn student, pay attention to what other clinicians are showing. You may, for example, see how flutist James Walker uses a metronome when practicing his breath control, and find a way to apply that to your horn practicing. Other times, you may find the style or attitude of a person to be helpful. What can I feature in sessions like these that will work especially well coming through a TV monitor? Which topics regarding horn playing need more attention? In planning this, the question that kept coming into my mind was, what techniques are unique to horn playing? So with all of this in mind, I've decided to present sessions with these topics. The position of the right hand in the bell. Let's face it, we're the only wind players who stuff a hand in the bell. The second session deals with playing in the low register. Horn parts cover the broadest range of any of the brass instruments, and low playing is usually the most neglected. The third and final session is concerned with playing with strong articulation. What other instrument has its bell pointing backward? Clarity is hard to achieve. So strong articulation is necessary, and you will learn all about that technique. Sooner or later, all French horn players are asked, "Why do you put your right hand in the bell?" You can just imagine how many times I have heard that question throughout my life as a horn player. In social situations, when a quick answer is appropriate, I explain that in the 1700s, horn players used a natural horn, a horn like this with no valves. With the right hand, they could change the natural notes, sometimes called bugle notes, so that they could play most of the notes of the scale. This horn is keyed in F. In the Telemann excerpt, which I just played, the written F is a false note. By using the right hand in the bell, a player can make it sound in tune. In the time of Mozart, the players had to use a very elaborate kind of changing with their hands. There are some old books that show how a player should make F sharp sound different from G flat. So, from the days of the natural horn, we have the traditional sound that can only be created with the right hand in the bell. Just imagine, even in this modern age, we players of the French horn observe a tradition from the time of George Washington. The other reason we horn players have our right hand in the bell is that the large, sudden flare of the bell causes the notes of the upper register to be extremely false or out of tune. The right hand in the bell corrects this problem. In effect, the hand causes the acoustical dimension of the bell to be more narrow. It changes both the sound and the pitch. Today, with our modern horns, such as my Yamaha Model 862, the right hand in the bell serves two functions aside from holding the instrument. The first is that it controls the tone coloring. How a player does this, for the most part, is a matter of personal preference. The second function is the position of the hand corrects the intonation problems in the upper register because of the design of the French horn bell. This is not a matter of personal preference. It has to be right. The matter of correct positioning reminds me of a story that was told when I was in the United States Marine Band. I trust that you all know that in the Marines, everything is done in a very strict way according to military regulations. Each year, the Inspector General of the Marine Corps would come to make an inspection of the band. One day, he spoke to a bandsman. "Tell me, Sergeant, where do you put the retaining clip for your tie?" You can imagine how startled the general was when, in reply to his question, the bandsman said, "Well, I guess right about here, sir." Should you ever be asked where you put your right hand in the bell of your horn, I hope that your study of this session will prevent you from saying, "Well, let's see, I guess about out here." Let's now consider the matter of correcting the horn's intonation problem in the high register. I say in the high register because it is there that the acoustics go wrong. Let me show you how the intonational relationship of notes is really quite good in the low register, regardless of what I do with my right hand. But notice what happens with the high notes. If a player holds his hand completely out of the bell, this is what happens. Not having the right hand far enough into the bell is the most frequent mistake an inexperienced player makes. Not keeping the fingers straight is another problem. Curling the fingers can be a disaster. A similar problem arises if there are spaces between the fingers. Have you noticed how the intonation goes bad in the high register? It is amazing how a young player can make very good progress with a horrible right-hand position simply because he or she does not have to play in the high register with refinement. Please, just get the note. I have heard a fairly strong player complain of a horn's intonation problems when the fact was that the right-hand position was the problem, not the horn. I must stop this talk of what can go wrong with the right-hand position. What rules for the position of the right hand will ensure that the high register will have the best possible intonation? Rule 1. The hand must be positioned far enough into the bell. Different bells have different flares, and different hands have different sizes, so the proper position may vary. Just the same, it is safe to say that in regard to intonation, the hand cannot be too far into the bell. Rule 2. The backs of the fingers must be flat against the bell. This rule seems simple enough, but at a time of nervous tension, it is often broken. Have you ever done this? Rule 3. The fingers must be held together with no spaces. Some people call it the claw. Some players want to appear to be cool and nonchalant. The fact is, there can be trouble if those fingers separate. Train yourself when you practice to have the proper right-handed position at all times. When a person talks about tone color, many abstract and subjective words are used. We use words like dark, bright, heavy, light, muffled, clear, better, worse, pleasant, harsh. But even with its subjective nature, the fact is the tone of the French horn is its most striking feature. Tell someone you play the horn, and they'll probably answer, "Oh, I love that tone." It is very helpful to visualize tone as something that can be seen. The term tone color implies vision. Imagine the bell of your horn with you playing it without your right hand inside. From the throat comes this sound that can be seen. What does it look like? Is it vivid? Is it narrow or broad? How long does it hold its shape before it dissolves? You know, we are going to be placing our right hand in that bell. How will this affect the tone? We already know that the depth to which we place our hand in the bell is dictated by the rules of intonation. The angle of our hand across the bell determines how much we change the natural sound. It is my opinion that a player, having inserted the hand into the bell for intonation purposes, should make very little additional change to the tone. In other words, once the right hand is in there, keep it as straight as you comfortably can. That stream of tone that we visualized will now have a slight elbow. The other matter is where from side to side should we place the right hand. Those of you who hold the bell off the leg have very little choice. You must hold your hand vertically so that you can best support the weight of the instrument. Therefore, your hand will be on the outside wall. For those of you who rest the bell on the leg, I strongly recommend that you put your hand on the bottom wall and imagine you are directing the tone stream over your shoulder. Never direct it into your body. Also, when you begin to use the technique of hand muting, you will find it works best with the hand starting on the bottom wall of the bell. Before concluding this session, let us review what has been said about the position of the right hand in the bell. I have shown you that as a player reaches higher levels of proficiency, the proper positioning of the right hand becomes more important. As the standards for intonation in the high register become more demanding, the right hand must be in the proper place. 3 rules were offered as a guide for good positioning. Rule 1, the hand must be far enough into the bell. The design of a horn bell causes the upper notes to be terribly out of tune. The right hand must correct this. Rule 2, the fingers must be straight and against the wall of the bell. If the fingertips lift away from the bell wall, the acoustical correction changes. Rule 3, there should be no spaces between the fingers. Leaks or spaces also change the acoustical correction. In addition to these matters of intonation, a higher level player must be more discriminating in matters of tone color. My advice on this matter was that once a good position is established for intonation, the clear resonant quality of a good horn tone should not be changed any further by covering over the bell with the right hand. So, the simplest thing I can say is, get it in there far enough, but once it's in there, keep it comfortably straight. In listening to the Haydn Trio, most of you probably noticed the high notes more than anything else. There is no denying that there were a lot of high E flats and even a high A flat, which is the E flat above high C for you horn and F thinkers. Your reaction is understandable. There's something about high notes that attracts attention. Perhaps this is why the tenor and soprano are always the more popular singers in an opera company. Even so, Haydn realized the possibility of having the horn play low notes as well as the high. Did you hear those low E flats? I know that when a person becomes serious about playing the horn, low playing will need his or her attention as well as high. When I was in high school, I didn't know of the possibilities of playing low on the French horn. I worked hard and I was even first chair of the all-state band one time, but I never really had to play low. When I went to college, I heard Till Eulenspiegel's Merry Pranks for the first time. Then came the third horn solo, a minor third lower. Imagine how amazed I was. When I first studied the special passages in Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony, I saw how low the second horn part was at the beginning of a solo. Around 1960, I bought a recording of the Glière Horn Concerto. I was fascinated by many things, especially the low playing in the cadenza. Throughout this time, I was striving to learn how to make my low horn playing effective. It wasn't easy. Finally, I did get some success, and I realized benefits that went beyond just the ability to play the low parts. The struggle was helpful in other ways. Aside from being able to play the low parts, I realized these overall benefits. More than ever before, solving the problems of low playing required me to be thoughtful and systematic. The methods of force and strength didn't work here. My analytical mind had to be put into use. In an almost mysterious way, I found that I was playing with greater ease throughout the range of the instrument. In playing low, the role of the air is given tremendous attention. The embouchure supports the air and in doing so relaxes. This relaxation spills into the upper register as well. In the flexing and shifting of the embouchure, greater strength was established. The muscle-building high workouts did much to improve my strength, but low horn drills helped the embouchure to become firm and set. So once I sense that a player is getting serious, I make certain that low skills are stressed. The way in which a player uses his or her air is extremely important in all types of wind instrument playing. In the low register, this is especially true. In helping students with low playing, I have found that showing them how to form a good embouchure does the most good. The proper use of air follows easily. Therefore, in this session, I will show the basic principles of a low register embouchure and methods one can use to achieve it. Practice routines and performance preparation will conclude this segment on the low horn playing. In all brass playing, one must be aware that the lips vibrate in and out, not up and down. I hope none of you are offended by this simple statement. I take the trouble to mention it because so many players seem to overlook its truth. In horn playing, the upper lip generates the vibrations that make the tone. So when we want to play notes in the low register, there has to be room enough for the larger strokes of the vibrations. If we look at this chart, we can see that in a normal position, the upper teeth are right behind the upper lip. By lowering the chin and keeping the lips together, we allow for more space behind the upper lip. You can feel the difference with your finger if you do this simple test. Start with your chin in a normal position with the lips together. Press your upper lip gently with your finger held in a horizontal position. Then, keeping your lips together, lower your chin's position and press your finger there again. Do you feel how the lip can move more and actually feels softer? In doing this experiment, we have to keep the lips together. This forces the upper lip to stretch downward. In forming a good low register embouchure, keeping the lips together is necessary for this reason, but also because unless the lips are together, there will be no vibration, or if you please, buzz, made when the air passes through. My colleagues at the Philharmonic have different ways of describing how to form a good low register embouchure. Some say that you have to drop your jaw. Others say pull down the corners. The greatest description is look sad. All of this relates to the principle of allowing for more room behind the upper lip when we wish to play low notes. It is not uncommon to hear horn players talk about the shift. Where do you shift? Is there time to shift here? I never shift. Do you? The shift is a term that refers to the changing of one's embouchure to a different position. In my opinion, in order for a person to play well in both the high and low registers, a shift has to be made. Whenever a person says to me that he or she plays without making a shift, I immediately suspect that there will be a problem either in the high or the low register. It is my conviction that a student player, when trying to learn the mysteries of low playing, should first develop a good low embouchure. Then, once that is established, a lot of effort should be applied to developing the ability to shift between the two positions accurately, smoothly, and quickly. The practicing becomes a matter of perfecting one's skill in shifting. There are many etudes and books that feature this kind of practicing. In my practicing, and that which I recommend to my students, I also have part of the practicing time used playing drills that require shifting between the high and the low registers. I like drills where the shifting is at first simple and slow, and then increases into more elaborate patterns. For example, one could first do a simple two-note drill like this. the drill could eventually be increased to this. Arpeggios are always good for practicing, for the benefits a player achieves for intonation. They are also good for perfecting the embouchure shift. Scale studies challenge one's technical skills. They are also good for the embouchure shift if the range is great enough. Planning and marking where you are going to shift in a passage that has both high and low notes will help you to be more dependable. Many notes can be played on either a high or low register embouchure. It varies from one player to the next. I can easily play on either embouchure all the notes between the F that is just below the treble clef staff and the F that is written on the first space. So, the 2-octave C major arpeggio can be played with a shift at 4 different places before the first G, or C, or E, or the last G. This means that a player, in preparing a piece, must think about where the shifting will work best. Once the decision is made, the shifting places should be marked and then observed whenever the piece is played. Notice how my part to the cadenza of the Glière concerto is marked. The shifting that I have to do is a very important part of my preparation. At this point, I am wondering if some of you viewing this session are getting your first awareness of the possibilities of low-register French horn playing. The thought is very exciting, since if you now take the challenge to solve the puzzle of playing down there, I know you will start experiencing the benefits. You will also have the thrill of using another sound as you express yourself as a musician. It will be like a painter getting a new color for his palette. But of course, regardless of your level of awareness, I hope that some of my thoughts and suggestions are helpful to everyone. Do you recall the benefits beyond having the ability to play the low parts that I mentioned? I spoke of how a person struggling with learning to play in the low register has to use his or her analytical mind. Force and strength don't work by themselves. Also, there is the greater ease of playing in all registers due to a relaxation of the embouchure. Developing an embouchure that is firm and set was the last special benefit I spoke of. The flexing and shifting a player does in low horn drills has this effect. The basic principles of a low register embouchure were described mainly in the relationship of the upper lip to the upper front teeth. Low sounds are created by vibrations that have large strokes. For low playing on a brass instrument, a player must allow for this with space behind the upper lip. I demonstrated in a simple test using the finger against the upper lip. It showed how when we lower our chin while keeping our lips together, we create this space. very easily we show ourselves a good low embouchure. The final part of this session dealt with practicing and planning for good low register playing. Once a player can play low with a good embouchure, all that is needed is the ability to shift between the regular embouchure and the low embouchure. There are many drills and etudes that range in difficulty from simple to very tough that deal with shifting. This should be a part of a player's practicing routine for as long as he or she wishes to play. Planning for when to shift is sometimes overlooked. In preparing a piece for performance, the shifts should be marked. Then, whenever it is practiced, the routine will be established. Good luck as you dig into the depths of the low register. In a recent issue of Yamaha's Music Education Journal, I wrote an article entitled Beginner Horn Articulations. Now, nearly a year later, I still have a very strong inclination that I should talk more about articulation for horn players. In that article, I wrote about my reaction to student players, and the intent was to characterize very young players. Since then, that special interest has caused me to notice the articulation of players far beyond the beginning level, such as advanced college-age players, and even some of my colleagues at the New York Philharmonic, in regard to their articulation. In particular, I reacted to the strength or lack of it in their tonguing. When I was invited to present my ideas for this video series, I realized that I still had more to say about the matter of articulation. In the magazine article, I discussed two special problems faced by horn players related to the design of their instrument. The problems were actually twofold. First of all, the funnel-shaped cup of the mouthpiece tends to make articulations less clear. The trumpet or trombone mouthpiece has a more cupped shape, and with that, articulations speak more clearly. A simple test with only a mouthpiece can show the differences in response between a horn and a trumpet mouthpiece. The second problem is that the bell points away from the audience. This is quite obvious, but yet, how many of us playing the horn really consider the effect of this backward situation? Even before the listener hears anything, he will suspect that there will be a difference in sound between this and this. What are you, the performer, going to do about it? After posing the two problems in the article, I explained what I meant by strong articulation. My definition was that each tongue note should sound like a rectangle of sound. It did not mean that notes should start with a louder sound that would sound or look like this. Neither should there be an increase of sound after it begins. Nor should there be a decrease in sound just before it ends. Certainly, there should be no slapped ending. The concept of a series of rectangles best describes good, strong tonguing. The strongly articulated scales in the Loeillet piece show this very well. My main hope for that Yamaha article was that teachers would become more aware of their horn students' articulation. In particular, attention should be paid to the sound at the end of notes, since the manner in which we end notes has such a strong effect on the beginning of the next note. Paying attention to those endings will improve articulation generally. A moment ago, I said that I find myself reacting to the articulation of players at all levels of skill. I suspect that you know that the higher a player's skill level, the more likely it is that I will be admiring the articulation. Have you ever noticed how clearly you can observe the fabulous unity of bowing in the violin section of a great symphony orchestra? Well, what you are seeing is their articulation. It is only with such bowing, or if you please, articulation, that 18 players can sound as one. Have you ever heard the staccato part the brass section plays in the third movement of Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony? I'll never forget the first time I heard it. It seemed as though I could feel the music pushing against me more than I was hearing it with my ears. The clarity and unity of the articulation made a tremendous contribution to the performance of the music. Some of you may find this hard to believe, but I've also been impressed with the effect that good articulation of the French horn parts has on the performance of traditional marches. Early in my career, I was a member of the United States Marine Band. You know, at one time, that was John Philip Sousa's band. There were many remarkable qualities in the performances of that wonderful ensemble. But for me, the style of playing marches was extraordinary. When I first started playing with the band, I soon realized that the horn players took their role in the marches very seriously. I'm convinced that this was one of the contributing factors in that great Sousa style. The next time you hear or play the Washington Post March, listen to how the horn players are performing their part. If it is a good performance, I'll guarantee that the horn players are using strong articulation. There is another benefit which comes from strong articulation, beyond what it does for good style in performance. That is the fact that strong articulation encourages a good embouchure and proper use of the air. If you have ever forced a simple piece of rubber hose over a water faucet, you probably saw the hose jump off the faucet when you made the water pressure too great. If the hose's grip on the faucet had been strengthened by a metal clamp, the water could have flowed through with considerably more pressure. Now, let's compare the way the hose is attached to the faucet, referring to it as embouchure. And the water will be air. If the embouchure is weak, very little pressure can be tolerated. If we think of the hose clamp as muscles, we can understand how more air pressure can be used. In other words, strong articulation forces a player to use the muscles that keep an embouchure firmly in place. Strong articulation also encourages a player to expel the air properly. Whenever we speak in a whisper, the words tend to connect, and there is a restriction in the throat, something like this. On the other hand, if we need to speak with emphasis, the words are more distinctly separated, and the throat is more open to allow for the deep air support to come through freely in this way. Likewise, in playing a wind instrument, strongly articulated, neatly spaced notes forces a player to expel the air from way down deep through an open, relaxed throat. Have you ever noticed that before a Major League Baseball game, the players perform certain drills and exercises that are the same ones we did as Little Leaguers? Is that just because the Little Leaguers like to imitate the pros? I think not. What is done in sports is a constant and lifelong training and conditioning of the athlete. The warm-up game of catch before the game is done by both Little Leaguers and Major Leaguers. Likewise, there is the swinging of the bat before hitting. In each case, the muscles are tested and the basic technique is rehearsed. You probably have guessed that I now want to substitute musician for athlete. Well, you are right. But I also want to stress the fact that the routine is lifelong and constant. Believe me, the French horn major leaguers are using the same scales and arpeggios that you players in junior and senior high school use. The subject of training and conditioning could be a complete session in itself. However, all I want to do now is to show some strong articulation drills that can be used throughout one's playing days. I hope that I will emphasize their importance as well. The student in the earliest stages of development plays scales, or at least parts of scales. The style in which this is done can make a big difference in how quickly the student will progress. I would like to recommend something like this, making the ending of each note important. A more advanced player should be sure to play scales and arpeggios with deliberate articulation. A favorite of mine is a 3-octave arpeggio, executed in this following style. When I actually use the drill in a practice session, I keep repeating the arpeggio each time a half step higher until I begin on C. There are also many books designed to be used as daily drills. Almost every player I associate with has used, or for that matter, still is using, a book of this type. My favorite is a collection of drills compiled by a former colleague of mine, Joseph Singer. His book is entitled Embouchure Building for French Horn. If at this point you are thinking to yourself, this guy Kuyper really worries about tonguing, my effort has achieved the wrong result. My opinion about how well young players tongue is that there is no special problem. But I am concerned about the quality and the style that developing players use when tonguing. In other words, strong articulation is not concerned with the technique of tonguing or its speed. It is very much concerned with what kind of sound a player is trying to make when tonguing, and also with how much importance that player gives to strong, clear articulation. I have shown that musical style in performance often needs strong articulation. But strong articulation is important to players for the sake of good embouchure development and maintenance as well. Just as a hose needs to be firmly clamped in order to accommodate strong water pressure, an embouchure must have the strength to hold itself firmly in place to accommodate strong air pressure. Good horn players should look forward to a lifetime of keeping the embouchure in shape, in much the same way as athletes keep their bodies and skills in shape. Whether it is little scales for beginners or elaborate arpeggios for an advanced player, strong articulation should be a part of one's daily drills. Remember, the actor must use good diction, and we musicians must use good articulation. I have been told that with some music educators, there is a bit of confusion over tuning a double horn. So it will be helpful to some of you if I insert here my suggestions on the subject. First of all, it is important that we realize that the term tuning a horn actually means setting the tuning slides in the best possible position. Even though the horns manufactured today have design features and quality control that helps them get closer to perfection in regard to tuning, playing in tune comes ultimately from the skill and interest of the performer. Secondly, it is true that the double horn poses a different situation from the other valved brass instruments. The two sides of the horn should have the slides set properly in relation to themselves. The tuning slides for the valves are set in the same way as one would for the trumpet or tuba. I am going to demonstrate the proper way of setting the tuning slides for these two types of double horns. My horn, the Yamaha Model 862, has no special slide for the B-flat side of the horn. This horn, the Yamaha 668, does have a separate B-flat tuning slide. Both designs work very well, and I would never let the presence or absence of a B-flat tuning slide affect my decision on choosing a horn. Whenever a player tunes up, the notes played should be quite loud and clear, and never with vibrato. We must remember that we are testing the instrument. We are not performing. Another general rule is tuning slides should not be set in the totally in position or extremely out position. When a slide is totally in, a player has nowhere to go if circumstances require playing a bit sharper. Too far out creates the danger that the slide might drop. But even worse than that is the fact that when a tuning slide is too far out, and this is especially true for the main tuning slide, the acoustical design of a horn is changed. The inside diameter of a tuning slide is greater than the main tubing. If either of the extremes are necessary, a good instrument technician can modify a horn. However, a person should be absolutely certain before any modifications are made. The first step in knowing how to tune a double horn is to locate the main tuning slide. This slide affects both sides of the horn. It is usually the first slide the air meets as it goes through the horn from the mouthpiece. You can find the main tuning slide by tracing the air's path with your finger. The test for knowing if you have the main tuning slide is to remove the slide and blow air through. If the flow of air is not altered by any of the valves, you have the main tuning slide. On any horn, the main tuning slide must be the one used when a player adjusts to others. Once you have located the main tuning slide, you can proceed with the tuning of the double horn within itself. With a model that has a separate slide for the B-flat side, a player must identify which slide serves which function. The test for this is similar to the one we used for locating the main tuning slide. The difference is that in this case, you will change the position of the thumb valve to see which side is affected. This is the slide for the B-flat horn. These two affect the F horn. Most horns have two slides for the F side. One of them is there for the purpose of cleaning water from the horn. Be sure that you use only one for tuning, otherwise it gets a bit confusing. Now that you have identified the F and the B-flat slides, set them out very slightly, maybe 1/4 of an inch. Using a strong, clear tone, compare the two sides on middle C and the octave above middle C. If any adjustment is needed, be sure that each slide is left out a bit. For example, if the F side is lower, don't push the F all the way in. Raise it just a bit, and then lower the B-flat slide to meet it. You'll allow each slide to be out. The main tuning slide will take care of the horn's general pitch level. Tuning both sides of a horn that has no B-flat horn tuning slide also works easily once you understand the method. With this, it can be said that the main tuning slide serves both the overall pitch level of the horn and also the B-flat side. The most important procedure to remember is that when tuning a horn of this style, you first tune the level of the B-flat horn using the main tuning slide. Then, using the two C's, you can adjust the F horn to the B-flat using the F horn tuning slide. But what if you are told a note on the B-flat side of the horn is not in tune? Let's say it's flat. So you push in the main tuning slide. But now you have a problem. Do you know what it is? Your F side will be sharp. The solution is simple. Just pull out the F tuning slide. Believe me, once you understand it, it is not difficult. To summarize, I will leave you with a couple of very basic rules. Once you have identified the function of each slide on a horn, Rule 1, if the horn has a special tuning slide for the B-flat side, be sure that no slide is totally pushed in. Rule 2, if the horn has no B-flat tuning slide, adjust the B-flat horn first and then fit the F horn to it.